Welcome to English 1120 with Southern Utah University. In this video for the Introduction to Grammar course, we're going to discuss how sounds of English are related to the grammar of English. So in this video, we want to make the distinction between something called segmentals and something called supersegmentals. And then more specifically, we'll focus on a feature called stress and how it affects both word stress and sentence stress and the connection that those features have to grammar. So here's the question: why are we talking about pronunciation in a grammar course? Pronunciation is a different system than grammar. But the reality is that punctuation can connect to grammar. Just as in written language, we have things like spelling, punctuation, formatting on a page. Those features help communicate some of the grammatical structures and rules and patterns of the language. Well, with the spoken language, we have similar kinds of features. We have something called segmentals, we have supersegmentals. We also have nonverbal language that also helps communicate the meaning and the purpose and the patterns of what we expect in the language. So we'll look at some of that today. So these two terms, segmentals and supersegmentals, are the main terms that are used to describe pronunciation. Now, segmentals are what we think of as individual sounds. We consider these the phonemes of the language if you ever taken another linguistics course. So a phoneme is the smallest unit, meaningful unit of sound that a speaker of that language would consider being a separate sound in that language. So in English, we have consonants and we have vowels, and we have about 24 different consonants in most dialects of English, and at least 13 types of vowels. Some dialects will have a lot more. So what's interesting there is it's a lot more than the alphabet. So we have sounds that don't have a consistent letter for them. We have different ways that we represent those sounds in English. But this video isn't really so much about the segmentals. Really, the grammar is more readily apparent through the use of supersegmentals. And supersegmentals go beyond just individual sounds. They cover things that happen at the word level, the sentence level, or even larger sections of discourse. So things like tone and intonation. Tone is more at the word or sound level. Intonation is more at the larger sentence discourse level. We'll talk about that maybe later. Same thing with rhythm. But for this video, we want to talk about word and sentence stress and how they relate to both pronunciation and grammar. So pronunciation stress is in English when we make our voice higher, louder, and longer. We keep those syllables or those words or those phrases more strongly pronounced than the other things that we pronounce. And that's how we create stress. Not all languages use stress in this way. They might do other things, but this is how we generally do it in English. So let's talk about word, or sometimes it's called syllable stress. Every syllable can either have strong stress or weak stress. And generally, if a word has more than one syllable, one of those syllables will get the strongest stress and the other ones will be weaker. So here's an example where we see it impacting grammar and meaning in words that are the same both in the noun and the verb form in the written language, but in the spoken language, we use stress to differentiate the noun from the verb form. Think of this first pair of words, record and record. Now, we reason that those words, even though they're spelled the same, they're pronounced differently, and we pronounce them differently due to the syllable stress. With the noun, we stress the first syllable, record, and with the verb form, we stress the second syllable, record. And what's happening there is when we don't stress the syllable, its vowel sound gets reduced more to a schwa. The schwa is the sound. It's the unstressed syllable sound, and that happens quite a bit in English. So we've got some other examples there. You can think about these on your own if you want. Pause the video and then see if you are able to correctly mimic and identify those different stress patterns. So we have permit and permit. present and present. And same thing with conflict and conflict. In English, generally, when we add syllables through morphemes, okay, we generally are not changing the stress patterns if it's an inflectional morpheme. So things like past tense, present tense, past participle, present participle, possessive, plural, comparative, superlative. All of those inflectional morphemes don't change stress patterns, but derivational morphemes might change stress patterns. And let's just look at some examples here. The word hospital. We've got stress primarily in the first syllable, but then when we switch to hospitality, now we've shifted the stress to the end of the word before we add this ity suffix. We have hospitalize, then we have hospitalization. And so we've got those changes there. So sometimes when English takes on new morphemes, we might change the stress in a word depending on which suffix is added and whether that suffix shifts the stress pattern. Look at these other words. You can, if you want, pause the video, say these words to yourself and see if you can recognize how the stress is shifting. Photograph, photography, photographer, photographing. Now then, beyond this word level, we have something called sentence stress. And in a normal English sentence, the content words will receive more stress. The function words will receive less stress. So remember, content words are things like nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. The function words are things like articles, pronouns, auxiliary verbs, prepositions. And so the idea is the most important words in the sentence are the ones that are being stressed because those are the ones that the listener needs to hear the most. So here's an example sentence. If you want, you could pause the video, you could identify what are the content words, and those are the words you would speak more clearly. The other words you would speak more quickly and quietly. Most of the listeners would have enjoyed the speech by the president of the local charity. So we're seeing there that the words most of the listeners would have enjoyed the speech by the president of the local charity. And this is one of the reasons why English can be very difficult for learners in terms of listening, is because English speakers generally do not pronounce function words very clearly. Because what we're doing is the most important words we are saying very clearly, and the other words we just kind of squish together because the meaning is held in the other words. If we were to give every word equal stress, this is what English speakers think robots sound like. Most of the listeners would have enjoyed the speech by the president of a local charity. It becomes harder for English listeners to actually understand the sentence because what their ear and their brain is accustomed to listening for the content words, and their brain kind of fills in the gaps with those softer sounds as to what the function words are. Now, that's a normal kind of sentence stress, but we sometimes will shift sentence stress depending on what kinds of meaning we need the sentence to give, how we want to manipulate the grammar. So one of those ways is through emphatic stress. The most important words will receive the stress. So if we want to really focus the meaning on a particular aspect of the sentence, we will say that word stronger than all the other words. He was the only one to arrive on time, or we will not support the initiative. So we have this ability to do this through our pronunciation, that we can stress other words, and that gives the listener's attention to that particular meaning or aspect of the sentence. Contrastive stress is another way to do this. Generally, we see it in pairings of words where we want to highlight the difference or the contrast between the words. So do you want this one or that one? And those two words are being stressed the most. This also gets into a little bit about intonation, which we'll talk about in another video, but we've got a higher pitch with this, we've got a lower pitch with that, and that's highlighting that contrast. She must be at the lab or the warehouse. Okay, so lab, warehouse, this one, that one. That's a pretty common feature of contrastive stress in English. So just keep in mind that we can use stress as part of our pronunciation as English users to draw attention to particular meanings within a sentence that are not visible in the written form, okay? Except unless we're going to put in things like bolding or other features that people have adopted into the writing system to try and indicate stress. So think about this sentence here that's at the bottom. You could stress different words in the sentence and you would alter the intended meaning of that sentence and how listeners might perceive what you think is to be maybe an underlying meaning that's not captured simply in the syntax of the sentence. So for example, normally stressed would be, my friend Dawn will hike the sea trail next Friday. But if you do, my friend Dawn will hike, well, now you're stressing that it's my friend and not yours. You're giving this hidden meaning of he's my friend. Okay. If you do my friend Dawn, we're stressing this as maybe not some other kind of relation. We're focusing on the friend relation. You say my friend Dawn will hike, then we're stressing that it's Dawn and not another person. My friend Dawn will hike. Now we're stressing the affirmative of the sentence. By stressing will, we're saying it's true. It's not the negative form. Okay? My friend Dawn will hike. We're stressing that he's hiking and not doing some other action. And we could go on and on with this, okay? Now, generally, function words often can't receive this kind of stress. It doesn't really make sense, but there are many function words that can function in this way depending on the syntax of the sentence. But what we want to learn from this is that we have the ability through our pronunciation and particularly through stress to influence the grammar and the intended meaning of a sentence beyond the syntax of the sentence, beyond the morphology. We've got this extra ability to influence how our words are received by our listeners. So we talked about segmentals and supersegmentals, and we really focused on a particular category of supersegmentals, which is stress. We talked about both word stress and sentence stress and how English users can use stress to influence grammar and the intended meaning of their utterances.